Friends, how are you? Welcome to Changing Tracks. Today our passenger on board our train comes from Jacksonville. How's it going? Welcome.
I'm good, thanks Christina for having me on the show.
Well, tell us a little bit about yourself, your name, where you're from, your family.
My name is Faith Tomaszycki, and I am from Jacksonville, Florida. I was born and raised in Jacksonville, and I'm 29 years old, so been here a little while. And I have come from a deeply strong Catholic family. My parents, they have had very strong faith since I can remember. And I kind of grew up in a really solid Catholic environment all of my life. And I have 3 other siblings.
Has your faith always been important for you, or was it just because of your parents?
That's a really good question, because as a small child I remember kind of butting heads with the rules and the limitations that come with parents who are strict. The way that I was raised was, with good Catholic morals, so there's a lot of rules, it seems like, when you're a child. So my parents did, a wonderful job, but I had this rebellion from a very young age, I can remember. So actually, I think the answer is no. I think I was really kind of butting heads with it from, a specific age would be around 14 years old was when I really experienced more of this is kind of like not, I was still Catholic practicing. I never actually remember thinking or admitting to the fact that this is not my religion, I don't want to be a part of it. Rather, I was very just like I said, the rebellion. There was something in me that fought against all the rules, and my mother teaching me to be modest and everything as well. I just didn't feel like I was very, I'm not sure exactly how to say it. So I guess in a way it was my parents' religion. They gave it to me and I was accepting it because I had to, yeah.
You mentioned that something happened when you were 14. What happened?
Well, I started kind of sliding down, backsliding down toward impurity. I, as a child, had been abused by one of my cousins, and the impact it had on me, I think, carried through to puberty. And so by the time I was 14 years old is when I can remember that kind of started going downhill with impurity and things like that. And then I was living a double life. I was going to confession and communion and everything, but then I was, impure Monday through Friday kind of deal. So it was I felt like I was very conflicted, and I felt that double life. I even remember explaining to my mom one time, I feel like there's 2 of me. There's a good guy and a bad guy, always clashing, always fighting with each other. And she would tell me, that that's from the devil, that he creates confusion and he wants you to think that there is a good guy, bad guy, and really it's not. It's your conscience trying to fight against the sinful thoughts and behaviors and things. And but still, I just couldn't really fight it, and not that because I was trying to do it on my own. I was trying to go to confession, and then it was all superficial, going and through the motions of the Catholicity that I had learned from a young age, to go to confession when we fall, and to continually go to communion. Through my younger years, my later years too, after 14, 15, 16, 20s, I was going to daily mass even, and then I would fall and I would run to a priest, and so it was kind of a really rough time for me. I couldn't seem to get my feet firmly planted in the church. I wanted to kind of live one foot in, one foot out, and have a taste of the world, and that came to kind of like bite me later on. Like it came back and haunted me, that desire to live two lives, to be two different people. It's not possible. Definitely not in the church. So that was kind of where I went to get to where I ended up. Impure, living at my parents' house, to finally butting heads with my parents about it so much. And I had lived with them until I was about 21 years old, and finally just kind of I clashed with them too much, and they were like, you can't live like this in our house. And so they just kind of issued an ultimatum, and I didn't like the idea of living under their rules anymore, and I wanted to do what I wanted to do. So I finally practically left like the church in a way. I still tried to stay with the basic sacraments, but the majority of my life was just living in and of the world from that moment on. So yeah, it was a really tough time. I moved out and got my own apartment, and my parents kept in touch. They had spiritual advice, and their spiritual director said, you know, try to keep peace between you and she, like that. Don't sever the ties, but don't, and welcome her in your home, but make sure you know to tell her that her lifestyle's unacceptable whenever you get the opportunities. I had a boyfriend, and we had a relationship going, and it was not a good relationship. And I was actually the one who was driving the boat on our impurity and things, and then I was, you know, again, like trying to live this Catholic lifestyle, and mainly so my parents wouldn't see what was going on, but they knew, my parents knew. So anyway, then I kind of, that relationship ended, and then a couple of other relationships happened. And by the time I was 22 years old, I had a really short relationship with a man who I had him come and live with me because I was worried for his safety, and, you know, which is really stupid and ridiculous and not ever a good idea for anyone. I don't recommend it. So anyway, we had our relationship for literally only about a month, a solid living together type of relationship. And at the end of that time together, he had to go to a different place for work, so he moved out, and I came to find out actually that I was pregnant. Not a real big surprise, but it was for me. And I always tell people when I tell my story that, you know, the pregnancy test has a little plus or minus sign, pregnancy, you're, you know, positive. And when I saw the little plus sign in the window, immediately, like this, I don't know, it kind of felt like a rush, just a flood of, like, of course, emotions, I'm sure, you know, and but definitely something other than that just made me automatically think. My first thought was not, oh great, what am I going to do? It was, I can't live like this anymore. I have to change, because this is not just about me anymore. And how wrong of me to have lived that way with my own soul, to play with fire like I did, and eternal fire at that. But then now I have another soul, and I was so grateful to God for that grace in that moment. But I know that it definitely came from where I came from the good upbringing, from the well-formed conscience, from the fact that abortion didn't enter my mind, to that I, you know, thought of another life being there, and that it was a whole nother soul, that I knew that was completely, I'm indebted to my parents. I am totally indebted to them teaching me all those wonderful things, so that when I got to that place, my thought wasn't like, you know, now what? I'm in big trouble, or anything outside of just, I can't do this.
And where did you get the strength to move on? Where did that trust come from?
The only thing that I remember, I mean, definitely I knew that I had to write my life and that I had to go to confession and everything. But with that rush of grace, like, there's like a strength that the Lord sends with it and a hope that the Lord sends with it. I mean, he doesn't give us grace without hope, because otherwise how could people be martyred? If you stop and think of it, like, brutally martyred for their faith. And they talk about that, and I think in a way this is similar. I mean, I don't want to compare it to martyrdom, but rather that when the Lord gives a grace, He gives us the strength and the hope to persevere. And so, yes, like I said, like, knowing that what my parents had taught me kind of gave me the ability to go back to my roots and remember that this is a life and a soul. But there was, with that grace, an immediate knowledge that, like, there was hope. There is hope in a new life, and I actually call my little guy my salvation sometimes, you know, because if it weren't for him, I would have maybe kept going that way, and definitely if it weren't for that grace-filled moment from the Lord, I could have accepted the pregnancy and continued living that way, and then my child would be exposed to that lifestyle, and then I would have just passed down possibly to generations a false lifestyle, way that we can't live this way.
And what would you say to the people who have fallen so low that they doubt that God can forgive them?
Again, what I was taught, which is that there is always hope in God, that He is a merciful God, and more merciful than this image of the just God that we have, that is, that He condemns to hell or says you can come to heaven. It's more like a God who looks down on His children and sees you struggling and just waits for you to come to Him and turn to Him. And I would say, just like, turn your eyes toward Him and don't look away, and just continue to go toward Him, because He is so full of mercy and love that He will never abandon you, not ever. And that's what we have to cling to, is that no matter what, God won't abandon us. We could lose everything like Job, and He didn't abandon Job. He let Job feel severe losses, but never gave up on him. So all of us have our moments, our little Job moments, and that was one for me, and it was little compared to what Job suffered, but very much like that. Like, we had those moments where we're like, why, God? Why me, and why now?
How did you get out of all of this?
Again, with like God's grace, His mercy, His love. One thing that really helped me was going to my parents to actually have to tell them. I, was already like feeling like I know I have to change, but definitely feeling the weight of it all coming on. And I think it was a week or two afterwards that I found out that I was pregnant, that I went to my mom and dad, and I just said, just blurted it out, I'm pregnant. And they kind of were like, well, we're not entirely surprised. But their first attitude was like, well, have you been to confession? Their first concern was with my soul. And I think I had gone sometime during that week, and I said yes. And they were like, okay, good. Well, what are you going to do? And at the time I thought that this man and I would get married and live a family life together, so I kind of told them that. And they were like, okay, well, let's just start with step one. How about you move out of your apartment and come back and live with us? And I was like, you're kidding. I mean, I've totally slapped you in the face. I said, how could you have so much mercy toward me? They said, well, because God had mercy toward us when we were younger, how could we deny you what He's given us? How could we do that and then call ourselves Catholic, you know, we can't do that, Catholic Christian people.
Okay, so you moved back into your parents' house, and what happened after that?
Well, I tried to see if this man, the father of my child, and I could get married. However, our pastor had been talking to my parents and was informed that this guy didn't seem like the right kind of person, but my pastor kind of put it off, like, because he was Jewish, that we shouldn't get married right away because of the disparity of cult, that would make it very difficult to live out a marriage between a good Catholic and a Jew. And so we decided to, the man was very upset by that. I was like, well, we just have to accept these words of wisdom. And but I was a little bit like, you know, I wanted to make it right, so I figured marriage was the best way. And then I just went and lived with my mom and dad and tried to continue a somewhat relationship, distant though it was, with this man. And then he and I kind of grew farther and farther apart the more that I started to talk to him about my faith versus having the conversations we used to have. He got farther and farther away from me, in that, you know, I don't think he had any intention of wanting to live that life with me. And I started to see that. Meanwhile, my parents were giving me a lot of support and a lot of encouragement, while at the same time keeping their own distance to make sure that I had a firm resolve and that I was going to, I had to kind of earn their trust when I moved back in with them. It wasn't just overnight. So I went my way, just thinking that was how life was. And it was actually such a peaceful time in my life. For the first time in my life with my parents, I didn't rebel against them. And it was the most peaceful relationship I have ever had in my life. And my parents talk about it fondly as well, that time was the best time. And I really got to know them as people, which is just a side note, encouragement to young people. Get to know your parents. They're good people and they love you and they have personalities, and don't fight against them. They just want what's best for you. Anyhow, we were working together in harmony, me and my parents, and talking to this man occasionally. And then one day, my dad sat me down and said, I have something that I need to tell you. Since this man has been telling us that he's always in the wrong place at the wrong time, he had talked about being arrested for one reason or another. My dad actually had hired a criminal investigator to follow him. And they brought the paperwork to me. And my dad started going through this man, citing his name several times in the police reports, and that he had gotten in a lot of trouble, including some drug use and things. And my eyes were just huge, because it was not the person that I knew or thought I knew. He was very peaceful, very caring, not at all like any of these descriptions. And I was just like, I wasn't in total denial, but I said, maybe you've got the wrong guy. He's got a very common name. And my dad flipped the last page, and there was his like full face picture. And I was like, whoa, you know, wow, that is him. This is crazy. And I looked at my dad and I said, one more grace-filled moment. I could have looked at my parents at that moment and said, you're crazy. There is no way. But instead, what came over me was this remembering how my whole life long, my parents had never lied to me. They had never made things up. They wouldn't do that. They're not the kind of people that would intentionally make up lies like this and print a photo out to make me hate this man because they didn't like him. This is not who they are. So I immediately was able to trust that what they were telling me, what my dad had found out, was the truth. And once again, just total grace. And thanking my parents for looking out for me, because, you know, he was not a kind of man you'd want to raise children with. Like, what to do here now, you know? And my parents said that they had consulted with, you know, a priest, and that the priest had told them to have me confront him and see if he denied or accepted it all, you know, what his reaction was going to be. So that was what we ended up doing. I called him, and of course, not a really big shock, he denied everything. He said that my father was crazy, who goes around hiring, you know, people to follow you and things like that. And I said, you know, no, my parents are not crazy. They love me, and they would never lie to me. But I'm pretty sure that you've lied to me enough. So, you know, if you're not going to accept these things and you're going to deny them all, then that's it. The relationship has to be over. And he said, well, are you going to take my child away from me? And I said, well, I don't see any other way around this, because I don't know you. I thought I knew you, I don't know you. And that's a harsh reality for anyone who, whether you live with someone short-term or long-term, this is the hardest part about it, because when you become emotionally and physically attached to another human being, it's very difficult for you to see and think clearly about that person. Only when you're on the outside can you really have a clear image. So another side note to young people, keep yourselves distant, and then there's less heartbreak and you can get to know that person. Anyway, I ended the relationship and tried to do all the things that I needed to do to get myself ready to have a baby and put the past behind me and move forward with, you know, my parents helping me. And I'm not going to say like, oh, then it was easy, because it wasn't. It was very difficult. It was peaceful, like I said, with my parents, but a very big challenge at the same time. I had fears then that would come to me about raising a child by myself, you know, maybe never finding a husband because I had a child over wedlock. You know, it would take a very big man to accept a child in who that wasn't his own. So very kind of a rare thing to find in this society, and I wasn't certain that that would happen. And so I worried about my child and our future together. However, again, it was I had an increasing prayer life from that moment on. I started attending daily mass again, and then going to adoration as many days as I could. It was so amazing. I remember I went to adoration one day, and I was kneeling there before Jesus in the chapel, and I said, you know, I just had another grace that came over me. It was like the Lord, when you open your heart to Him, it's like He just wants to flood you. That's what my dad always said, just open it a crack and He will like flood you with grace. And so it's funny that I kept having these grace-filled moments that people say are so rare, but you can have them. You just have to open your heart to God. And so I was in adoration and I was praying before Jesus in the Eucharist, and I said, I just remember having this feeling come over me and this thought in my head, and it was just, I don't need anyone. I don't need another soul in this life. I just need you. And if I keep my eyes on you, I mean, it was that moment of taking me from fearing that I may not find a man, I may not get married, you know, that we're superficial, that we're really totally unnecessary thoughts, because I have God. And I remember just, I think I was in tears at the end of that one, and I went home and I told Mom, and she was happy for me. And what is really funny is that I had gotten to know briefly a young man who would come to be my husband later on, Faith Tomaszycki, and I actually met him at a Home of the Mother retreat like 2 weeks after having that revelation, having that knowledge that I didn't need a man. I met him. We got to know each other as friends first, which was awesome, and he stuck with me through my whole pregnancy, and then after my son George was born, we stayed, you know, being friends. And about a year and some after my little boy was in my life, Fred asked me to marry him, and we got married. And come this March, we will have been married for 4 years. And he adopted George about a year after we got married. And we have 2 little girls, Claire and Annie. And my life is just totally transformed, and God, He's awesome, and He's there in our lives, and we try to have the family life like my parents taught me. So now we try to pray the rosary every night and go to adoration as a family, and just teaching my children to know, love, and serve Him the way I was taught.
How do you think Our Lady has influenced in all of this process?
That's a good question. I definitely have felt Our Lady's presence in my life. My mother, during the time that I was pregnant, I came to know of the image of Our Lady of Perpetual Help, and I love the story behind that image, but I felt like, wow, that's definitely who she's been to me. I didn't feel her as a child growing up as much as I did later on once I accepted the graces into my life, and then all of a sudden it was like having 2 moms, and I would pray to her to help me to be a good mother, and I continually pray to her to help me to be a good wife and mother, and to take care of my family the way that she took care of hers. But yeah, definitely love Our Lady and love to have her in our family.
Thank you, Faith. Thank you for your testimony today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christina, for having me.
You shall honor your father and your mother. I think today's testimony leaves it pretty clear. Okay, your parents are not there to bother you, especially when we are in the Lord and with the Lord. Under Our Lady's mantle, we are here to protect our children. So I can understand that you, young person or teenager, are watching me saying, yeah, but I get home and it's all norms and limits, and I can't do whatever I want to do. And I know, but think that God, through your parents, is protecting you and guiding you on the right path, just like Faith said. So let yourself be led. Let yourself be led. Faith, thank you. Thank you.